2 sleepover horror stories that will change your life forever. Story number 1. The shadows lengthened outside the old Victorian house as we settled in for our sleepover. Emily, Sarah, and I were best friends since childhood, and this night was supposed to be full of laughter and mischief. Little did we know that this sleepover would become a harrowing experience we'd never forget. The house belonged to Sarah's eccentric Aunt Mildred, who traveled frequently and allowed us to stay over with the promise that we'd respect the place and stay out of the forbidden attic. Sarah was always curious about what was up there, but she respected her aunt's wishes and never ventured past the locked door. As darkness enveloped the house, we huddled in the living room, surrounded by the glow of candles we'd lit to add to the spooky atmosphere. The wind howled outside, making the house creak and moan, but we brushed it off as the usual sounds of an old dwelling. "Let's tell scary stories," Emily suggested, grinning mischievously. "Sounds fun," I replied, feeling a slight shiver down my spine. "Who goes first?" Sarah raised her hand. "I will. Have you guys heard of the legend of the Whispering Widow?" We shook our heads, leaning closer, intrigued. It's said that long ago a woman named Evelyn lived in this very house. She was married to a wealthy man who left her alone for months on end due to his business travels. Lonely and neglected, Evelyn found comfort in the company of a mysterious man who moved into the house next door. They began an affair, and soon whispers of their secret trysts spread through the town. As Sarah continued her tale, I couldn't help but glance at the locked attic door. It seemed to loom over us, almost as if it was hiding its own secrets. One fateful night, Evelyn's husband returned unexpectedly. Discovering her affair, he flew into a rage and confronted her in the attic. The argument escalated, and in a fit of rage, he pushed Evelyn down the narrow stairs, causing her neck to snap, and she died right there in the attic. The eerie ambiance of the room seemed to amplify, and we were hanging on to every word. It's said that on dark, stormy nights, the spirit of Evelyn returns to seek revenge on those who dare to trespass in her home. She whispers to them, her voice filled with despair and longing, and anyone who hears her never leaves the house again. A chill washed over me, and I noticed Sarah's eyes fixed on the attic door. It was as if the story had unnerved her as well. "That's just an old legend," Emily said, trying to break the tension. "There's no such thing as ghosts." We tried to laugh it off, but the unease remained. We decided to play a board game to take our minds off the eerie story. But with each roll of the dice, the tension in the room seemed to grow. Around midnight, we heard a faint tapping sound, almost like nails against wood. We froze, exchanging nervous glances. "Probably just a branch from the old tree outside," Sarah said, trying to reassure us. But the tapping persisted and grew louder, seemingly coming from above us. We couldn't ignore it any longer. Together, we mustered the courage to investigate. Cautiously, we climbed the stairs to the second floor and followed the sound, which led us directly to the locked attic door. My heart pounded in my chest, and a sense of dread washed over me. "I really don't think we should open this," I said, my voice shaking. Sarah hesitated, but eventually produced the key her aunt had left in case of an emergency. With trembling hands, she unlocked the door. It creaked open, revealing a dark void inside. The tapping was now louder and more insistent, drawing us toward the darkness. We stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind us, leaving us in complete darkness. "Sarah, where are you?" Emily's voice quivered. "I'm right here," Sarah replied, but her voice sounded distant. I reached out, trying to find my friends, but my hand met only empty air. Panic set in as I stumbled forward, disoriented and terrified. Suddenly, a faint glow appeared in the distance, and as I approached it, I saw Emily and Sarah standing before an old mirror. "Look," Emily whispered, her voice tinged with fear. In the reflection, I saw myself, but something was horribly wrong. My eyes were hollow and my skin was pale and translucent. It wasn't just my reflection. Emily and Sarah looked the same. Then, from the darkness behind us, we heard a soft, desperate whisper. It was a voice filled with sorrow and anger, sending chills down our spines. "You shouldn't have come here," the voice moaned. We turned around to see a ghostly figure materializing before us. It was the image of a woman in a tattered white gown, her face etched with pain. "Evelyn?" Sarah stuttered. The ghostly woman nodded and extended her hand, her pale fingers curling into a beckoning gesture. "Join me," she whispered, "and be free from this mortal realm." Terror overwhelmed us, and we turned to flee, but the attic door was nowhere to be. Story number 2. It was a crisp autumn evening when my two friends, Kate and Alex, and I decided to have a sleepover at my grandparents' remote farmhouse. The idea seemed exciting. We were all adventurous teenagers looking for a thrill, and what could be better than spending a night in a creepy old house in the middle of nowhere? As we arrived at the farmhouse, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The place had a history of strange occurrences, and the locals believed it was haunted. But we dismissed the superstitions, thinking they were just stories to scare children. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting eerie shadows around the property. Inside the house, the air felt heavy, as if time had stood still. My grandparents had passed away, leaving the place unoccupied for years. Cobwebs adorned the corners, and dust covered every surface. We decided to make the most of it and set up our sleeping bags in the living room. Kate brought her Ouija board, and despite my reluctance, we decided to give it a try. As the planchette moved, we nervously giggled, thinking one of us was pushing it. But the giggles turned to gasps when the planchette moved on its own, spelling out chilling messages. "Get out," the board spelled, its movements quick and forceful. Laughter turned to fear, and we immediately stopped the session, trying to brush off the unease that settled upon us. "It's just a silly game," Alex said, trying to be brave. But the house had other plans for us. As we tried to sleep, strange sounds echoed through the empty halls. Footsteps, whispers, and faint cries penetrated the silence of the night. I thought it was just my imagination, but Kate and Alex seemed equally spooked. "Maybe we should leave," I suggested, my voice trembling. "No way! We came here for a scare and we're not leaving now," Kate replied, trying to muster bravado. Reluctantly, I agreed to stay, hoping that it was all just the wind playing tricks on our minds. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the feeling of someone watching me. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced around the dimly lit room. There, at the foot of my sleeping bag, stood a shadowy figure. It had no discernible features, just a dark, formless mass that seemed to shift and sway. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. Paralyzed with fear, I could only watch as the figure loomed closer. It leaned over me, and I could feel its icy breath on my face. The air grew colder, and I felt a weight on my chest, as if something was suffocating me. Finally, the ability to move returned, and I jumped up, waking Kate and Alex with my panicked gasps. I pointed at the corner where the shadowy figure had been, but it was gone. "You must have had a nightmare," Alex said, trying to console me. But I knew what I saw was real. It wasn't just a figment of my imagination. There was something malevolent in that house. Determined to prove my experience, I suggested using a voice recorder to capture any potential paranormal activity. Kate and Alex were skeptical, but agreed to give it a try. As we sat in the living room, the voice recorder running, we asked questions to any potential spirits. At first, there was silence, but then came the chilling response. "Leave now!" A deep, guttural voice boomed through the recorder. That was enough for us. We grabbed our belongings and rushed to the door, not daring to look back. As I fumbled with the lock, the door slammed shut with a force that sent tremors through the entire house. Panic engulfed us as we realized we were trapped. The windows wouldn't budge, and the doors were locked from the inside. It was as if the house itself was keeping us prisoner. With nowhere else to go, we retreated to the living room. As we huddled together, the temperature dropped drastically. Our breaths fogged the air, and we could see our own terrified expressions reflected in each other's eyes. "We need to find a way out," I cried, my voice desperate. Kate suggested we try the basement, where there might be another exit. Clutching a flashlight, we made our way down the creaking stairs, each step filled with dread. The basement was damp and musty, with cobwebs lining the walls. In the corner, we noticed an old, locked chest. As we approached it, the temperature plummeted even further. The air felt heavy, and a suffocating sense of dread washed over us. Ignoring the warning signs, Kate reached for the chest and pulled it open. Inside, we found old photographs, letters, and other relics from the past. But one item stood out: a weathered, ancient-looking book. As Kate opened the book, an ear-piercing scream echoed through the basement. It was a blood-curdling sound that seemed to come from all directions. We dropped the book and ran back upstairs, but the door to the living room had vanished. Tears welled up in our eyes as we realized there was no escape. The house had trapped us, and we were at the mercy of whatever malevolent force resided within its walls. As the night dragged on, we huddled together, shivering and terrified. The house seemed to come alive with sinister whispers and phantom footsteps. The walls closed in on us, and the air felt suffocating. Then, suddenly, as dawn broke, the house fell silent. The malevolent presence had disappeared, and the door to the living room reappeared. We didn't waste a second. We bolted out of the farmhouse, vowing never to return. To this day, we can't explain what happened that night. Some say it was just a collective hallucination, but we know the truth. We encountered something beyond our comprehension, something evil that had been waiting for unsuspecting victims like us. We may have escaped that farmhouse, but the horror of that sleepover gone wrong will haunt us forever.